Dr. Toure, what is your biggest takeaway?
Well, I'm a very optimistic person, so I was glad to hear that 12 out the 20 countries who reduced fastly poverty are from Africa, because I think that's always the balance that this report is trying to bring. Being very honest about the situation internationally, but at the same time, showing progress. I think it's very important to show progress. We've been in this business for so long. And I was also sort of a little bit disappointed when we are talking about all the data. Africa has suffered a lot from this lack of data. I was happy to hear the word data revolution, because we have seen progresses in Africa in many parts. At the same time, we are struggling with new challenges that came out of the post-COVID period. So I think we need to sort of see that balance being clearly sort of shown, so we don't look like we are sort of pedaling in a vacuum. People are trying to move forward. Countries, I'm talking from where I am in Africa. I mean, we have seen important increase in economic growth, and that brings me to one point that we need to discuss. When we are poor and multidimensionally, that's because most of the time those people don't have cash, they don't have incomes, not sufficient income. So we have to tie all the issue we are talking about to economic development, to economic growth. If we don't do that, we are looking at the consequences of a bigger problem, which is the lack of economic prospect for the poorest. And I think it's very important that we see that very much being laid out in the report. The other point I would like also to pinpoint is to say that these people sometimes become poor multidimensionally because of peace issues, conflict issues, climate impact issues. So that also have to be bring into the bigger picture. So when we look at solution, we can also have multi-dimension solution too. So data collection is something that we really need to work strongly. Impulsing economic growth, we need, I believe, a new international deal to end poverty. As human beings, the world has the means to end poverty. We do know that. We have to show also that. Sometimes it's also a matter of political will. And that's where UNDP comes in and the United Nations comes in, is to bring all the countries around the table so they can show the money for international development to preserve peace also. So the consequences also of having a huge bulk of people being multidimensionally poor is also a security issue for everyone. So that ties also the issue to migration. I'm in West Africa. The younger people tend to want to cross the desert and be directly in Europe. So how are we going to make sure that we build an international solidarity system so we address that? And lastly, poverty is not only about developing countries. We have to look it also into very developed countries. I lived a lot. I mean, I lived for quite some years in the USA, and I did my studies in Europe. I think poor people in those countries needs also, advocates, because I think poverty is a human dignity issue. So no matter where you live, and I think it might be even more difficult to bear when you live in a wealthy environment to be multidimensionally poor. So I think it's good to bring, the poverty issues as we see it in different parts of the world, but let's make sure we bring it as one, and we bring then the human rights issues, whether you're from Nepal or you're from Senegal or you're from the USA or the south of USA, you need to access minimum standards of health, of education and income. That's what I wanted to say at this point in time.
Thank you, opinion. How can sub-Saharan Africa become a success in poverty reduction?
Well, first of all, the debate is uneasy because you started by saying that the statistics are not good. As scientists, well, we work with statistics. So what we're going to say has to be quote to quote. And I challenge the United Nations Statistic Bureau to come up with better results. I mean, statistic from 2012 for Burkina Faso won't make it. So that's my first statement about that. Because I have been prime minister, I've seen on my own eyes progress being made, but if it is not recorded in statistic, then we're talking about the past, we are not talking about the present. So that's also a challenge for UNDP in terms of supporting the countries, but we have to do our own work. We're not gonna run away from that. Countries, African countries, need to come up with good statistics because it has a cost when you have old statistics. When you go on the financial market, you present an image that is not accurate. So, you're borrowing at higher rates, et cetera, et cetera. Investors are reluctant to come. I have, for instance, nice stories that we never talk about. In Senegal, we are 97% Muslim. And this year, consequently, last year it was the same situation. We had more girls sitting for exam to go to high school than boys in 2 consecutive years. But this is not recorded in statistics. So that might have an impact on multi-dimensionally being poor. But if it is not recorded, we won't see that. So, that's how we unfold as the decision makers in Africa, but that's also where we need the support to be made. But I do see 2 to 3 way of sort of making sure that we make good progress. First of all, is education, what I'm saying, investing heavily on women. The World Bank, made the case many, many times that women are smart economists. You're investing on them, you see a reduction of poverty. I mean, that is scientifically proven. We have to support them for their education. We have to deal with issues like early marriage. We have to address their reproductive health. We have to make sure that family planning, is available for them, especially for rural women, et cetera, et cetera. I can go on and on and on. When it comes to, keeping girls at school, we know that when women are more educated, they are more productive. They are an asset for their countries. So that is one way of doing it. And African women are doing are making progress. In Senegal, where I am, you have a 50-50 parity law at the parliament. As I speak, I'm a member of parliament. And, it brings me joy to see so many women at the parliament on an equality basis. So maybe we should also look at that route. Maybe we should invest more on that target group. The other also way of dealing with it is young people. The continent is the youngest continent in the world. 70% of the population is below the age of 35. You cannot have the ambition of reducing poverty if you don't address, young people's rights and needs. That's what brings me back to the economic prospect. We need jobs. We need jobs. We need jobs. But how are you going to create jobs? You're going to, increase investment, and you're going to, create economic growth, and then you're going to create jobs for young people. And then you're going to have a stable environment, a peaceful environment. So it's a package. Somebody talk about the bundle, of poverty, but there is a bundle for fighting poverty too. So that package, I would like to challenge scientists, researchers to come up with it. But I'm sure that within it, you will find addressing women's rights. You will find making sure that young people's become a force, a driving force for development. You would see the package brigade, the element of peace, and you would see also the element of safeguarding, in environment. So I see a bundle to address your question, really. But, I would see addressing strongly, the rights and needs of a pretty promising group, which is women. They are 51% of the continent. They are hard workers. We do know that they are the one working the most. There are many reports that show that. Then that might be sort of a strategy. And young people combining both target groups. I think if we invest heavily on those target groups, I am sure that we are going to have faster progress. We are making progress, but the whole strategy is how to accelerate change. I like to see that also in the reflection. We are reducing poverty as we go, but it's too slow. And when you deal with young people, you better be quick and fast, because patience is not, the strongest quality. So that's what I wanted to say. So let's think about the bundle. The bundle, of course, is the SDGs, and before that, the MDGs. But we have to come down to it, target, pinpoint, the group we want to work with. We must work with women and young people. Of course, we're gonna break them down into the rurals, into the poorest, into the most educated, the less educated, etc.
Yes, it's clear evidence that empowering women and children is a benefit to everybody. Dr. Toure, you highlighted, started to talk about the importance of addressing child poverty. Please expand on that, because Africa is where many of these environmental effects will be very harshly felt.
Well, I would say children and young people, as I said, 70% of the population is below the age of 35. 35 is quite young. So there is no way you want to deal with any development issue if you don't target young people. Common sense there. But that's not what we are seeing necessarily. So maybe let me come to the bundle of solution also, to put in front of the bundle of deprivations. I think we have to use the mechanism of the budget. We know that when you are in developing countries, everything is an emergency when it comes to budget. But I think we have to win the fight of the budget to make sure that within national budget, that's what we have done with PUDC, that means administrator talked about. Every single year, the funding for, this community development project has to be, the budget has to be reflected within the national budget. So that is the first mechanism that we need to use to make sure that we do have very precise budget line to deal with this issue of multidimensionally poor people. So that has to be very clear, pinpointed. When we talk about education, what we are going to do with the poorest children who, when they finish primary school, don't go to high school because they have nowhere to live. When they leave their villages, they cannot go to the city. Then that's the end of their education. What do we do with that? We need to see a specific budget line in the Ministry of Education dealing with scholarship, dealing with maybe boarding school, etc. We have to do the same when it comes to women. Women don't access lands. They don't access necessarily, financing when it comes to developing the agricultural activities. We need to see a budget line dealing with that. We need to see in the Ministry of Health, a budget line talking about family planning. I'm a former UNFPA staff. And I know how it impacts on productivities. I would not be able to talk to you right now if I had to raise 10 children, like most of my generation women did. So how are we going to use that leverage? And that's how we can work with different actors within institutions, including the parliament. I am a member of parliament, and that is going to be my most fight, looking at the budget and seeing whether those groups, are taken care of. In Senegal, we do have what we call the national registrations for vulnerable people. So we do know where they are. So that's why when we talk about statistics, there is a disconnect, because the government invested a lot in identifying, where these vulnerable people are. But what we are missing is strategies from the ground. Everything is dealt from, from upstairs, meaning the ministry. It's a little bit politicized also, that's the truth. And then we have to bring the approach to the bottom, at the neighborhood level. We do have here in our law what we call Conseil de Quartier, which means neighborhood council, where women are represented, young people are represented, the imam is represented. That's where, those poor live in the neighborhoods, and then the strategies need to, be implemented at the bottom before they go all the way up. So I think we need to reframe the way we want to deal with poverty. Of course, a state has the authority to define, policies at the national level. But until we make sure that we strengthen, we give, needs and strength and financing to our local, mechanism, it's going to be difficult to deal, effectively with reducing, this poverty we're talking about. So that, sort of require a reframing of how we see our intervention. Of course, you have to fight the bureaucracy, because I mean, you have to cut the transaction costs that are very, very high. In Africa, we have to tell the truth. I mean, from the minister to the councillor with the 4x4 cars and the meetings and etc. I mean, you end up with maybe 10% of the budget being sort of seen by beneficiaries. So, but we have to sort of go from the bottom up, as I said, and looking into how local authorities, how local governance can be strengthened to take care of these most vulnerable groups that we are talking about, is something that we need to think about very seriously.